Thank you. It's such a good place and what the value of it. I think the academic research really helps to understand how we can challenges. Talking about urban biotopes, I would like to talk first about reinventing the city, how we should create a healthy city. And then later on, landscape and nature-based change. And it's extremely structured compared to other lectures that I give. Normally, I don't have these chapters, so really be happy with that. Yeah. Yeah, you are. That's great. In my view, we all should make healthy cities. And what's a healthy city? A healthy city would be a city where you will be happy to live in and where the natural conditions are as they should be. And a long time we have forgotten about that. In the age of industrialization, air pollution was dominant. Later on, car possession made actually that our cities are hardly livable. And since half of the world is living in cities, and maybe even more in the future, we should create healthy cities. If not, then at least half of the world's population is living in poor conditions. So it's an obligation for us. We should do this. And if you think about that, we can realize that in the end, the rural situation decreases people, but that's still a large number of people. So if we only think about cities, we also should think about the rural areas around us. And of course, there are many goals that now are helpful for the debate, growth, discussion on how we should create cities and how we should make them better. But those aims and goals are a little bit abstract. Still, they are a way of communicating to each other on how we can set our goals. Starting with the goal, I think that's for design really important, because we are in design office. And if you ask a client, then they want to have something on time and within budget, and often they don't know exactly what they want. So if we just run in the direction that the client might want, we end up with a project that is not contributing to any of these goals. In our view, we should actually create a balance between healthy environment, healthy people, and healthy communities. And of course, that's not in every situation the same, but it starts with that we could live in conditions that we are behaving in a way that we can actually increase our life quality. Cities should be climate adaptive. We should change mobility, because if we are not making the shift from vehicular mobility to soft mobility, actually there will be no room for change. And in the end, a healthy city is also about creating vibrant places, because we should do this also for people and create livability in the city, and that people meet each other, there's social interaction, and it's inclusive. Thinking from that, we worked on some projects, and I'm going to present some to demonstrate how that could work. The first one is the foreshore project in Cape Town. Here's a design competition. There's still no decision, and that's a bit of a pity, because if you want to change, actually you need to decide and not be corrupt and wait for ages. But that's sometimes also the hard part of our life. Actually, the city consists of two worlds. And today I'm talking about the one world that maybe reflects a little bit more and is more closer to, let's say, our first world as we know it here in Europe, which things are more or less organized. But there's also the other world with townships. And we're working there as well. But if we would tell the same story for those townships that would not work. There you want to do some more function. So that in those areas, the small projects. Here, this is a scale is big. We worked in a design collective with several offices on a landscape and urban framework. And actually, the situation at the moment is that there is a foreshore, and that in the 60s they made an unfinished highway. And the unfinished highway is just ending where the city center starts. Actually, the city is disconnected from the water. It's not like the actual ocean, but it's the harbor. And the highway is actually giving you a perspective that you just can enter the city with cars and that everything goes fluid. But in fact, everything stops at that one junction. And minibuses, people from the townships who have to depart at 4 o'clock because they need to be on time for their buses in the city center, they are all stuck in traffic jam. If we look from a landscape perspective, we should look at the old landscape maps. Originally, the landscape was dominated by Table Mountain, as it is still today, but there were several rivers and streams running off from that. And these streams, they were linked to fertile land and some small developments. And over time, the city developed a little bit. And if you would look at the city center today, all the streams and canals later on are just dams. So actually, there's something underground in the sewer, but actually the landscape and the city are disconnected. And the grid pattern reflects sometimes to the landscape in name, but not in reality. If we look at the map, the area that is at stake is actually the front of the city, close to the water. And the proposal is actually very, very simple. We said, if we have now a highway, maybe we should change the highway, break it down, create the urban area, but also create green structures and make a new connection from the city to the water. Most important is actually that we look at the larger scale. This is not the scale of the competition. Nobody is asking for that. But if we think about what is really important, we should have a thought and a vision on a larger scale. And actually, if we would do it right, we would like to connect larger green structures or create larger green structures from the landscape to the water and connect also the river system to the landscape system. It's easier said than done. And if it's beyond your project scope, it will be really, really hard to do it. We need to tell the story to the city. Because maybe after us, there will be other landscape architects, there will be other people, and they will start on projects and start to understand what that project also might mean and what it can contribute to the city. And the new development, of course, we already can try to make the first step. In our view, it is just about connecting the smaller green areas to urban development and link it within the framework in the urban development. It means also that if you want to do this, and that's why the shift of mobility is needed, you need to change infrastructure. If you just accept what's there, it will never change. And if you imagine that a city like Cape Town doesn't have a normal public transport system, the first thing is actually that you should try to get there. It's also easier said than done, because people are actually obstructing the reconstruction of the railway because they have minivans, and minivans have an economic drive. But we also can create a system where the minivan is driving, let's say, towards a substation and not being stuck into the route from the township to the city center. So this is thinking about all layers. And gradually, this is enhanced mobility, we are able to disconnect the freeways, create a green podium, and in the end also build the program that's needed. In Europe, it's already difficult to create a city, of course, for all people, but everyone is invited to have a house, to stay, and work at that place. In the global south, it's even more complicated, because it means also that we need to have houses for the low-income people, for the no-regular people, because people can pay the rent, but not every month, and that needs to be included. One of the issues at this competition was also that the jury was asking, can you do it? And luckily the developer said, I came from the Dutch. I was bringing newspapers at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I worked till 12 in the evening. I'm really driven to get it work. And of course, I hope that if we do projects, that the developer also understands that this needs to be done. But it's part of the game. So it's not only the visuals that should be nice and that everything works together, but that we also create really community. And of course, you can scale it down, and then the green and the landscape should be connected also on the two levels, of course. That's a little bit harder. This is a 2D diagram that you see, but in fact, it also needs to be 3D landscape. And we should also incorporate all the tools in climate adaptation. We work with the toolbox for climate adaptation. Actually, it's our own book, our secret book. And there are all these small circles there are representing a tool that could be applied in several subjects. But it means, in fact, that we try to catch the water on the roofs, we bring it down in small doses to the inner cores, to the roof top, and then bring it down to smooth streams, or that it can infiltrate in the area. It's also about, this kind of project is about reconnection of spaces. So reconnecting city and harbor, reconnecting one space east and west. So it will be also about creating spaces and thinking of the citizen about city for all the time. And then we can create a new connected city. The problem is a bit that also the people in the competition, they ask for an icon. We don't have an icon. Clayton already has, that's the Table Mountain. We just should create good urban fabric and good landscape. If you think about those changes, how can we get there? How can we create landscape and nature-based change? I believe that first of all, it's a shift, a mind shift. It's a shift in thinking from, let's say, the urban structure to the original landscape. Our cities, our old cities, and that's why I started also the previous plan with the old man. Our cities have been grown from the landscape. They are petrified landscapes. And at one point, of course, we were able to create that big extensions that we got disconnected from the landscape. I know here in the Netherlands in the 70s, we were really proud about Haagse Beemden because it was a new urban prototype. But it was in fact just dumping 1.5 meters of sand on top of the landscape and then have this really nice neighborhood. In fact, you're disconnected. And we can, of course, we have all the technical means to create a situation that we want, but we should not do it. And the next project is a small project in Vlissingen, in the south of the Netherlands, and called Spuikom. And Spuikom is actually a type of historic area where we release the water from the inland to the sea. Water was collected in Spuikom, and when there was a ebb, you could release it. And during floods, your locks needed to be closed because otherwise you would get the seawater in. We worked on this project, it's a 7-hectare project just behind the coast. And in fact, it is close to the boulevard, but just behind the boulevard. It was part of a project called SARC, which is a European program, coastal defense and innovations. And first of all, I thought, okay, how are we going to do that? Coastal defense and innovation, just behind the coastal defense. Later on, we understood that there were potential. And once that we had finished our design, we got also into contact with TU Delft, who were at that moment also asked to create a solution for extreme flood projects. I think we've met over there. Our project is about creating a holistic design. So this small town wanted everything. They wanted to have houses, they wanted to have nature, they wanted to have a recreation area, they wanted to have leisure. And if you think about such a program, you think maybe you're asking too much. Maybe you can get it all, but not in the way that you sum it up. There were plans before just to create in a small place, just some building blocks. But in fact, it is thinking about what could be a new development for a coastal town. And then we go back again to the original landscape. And if you think about this in the first map on Deventer, in the mid-16th century, we're lucky that these old maps exist, because in many countries there are not, because we are always had the harbor towns, and they needed to be well documented, even by our enemies, because you might attack or you might enter. Nicely is that you see that there's a structure, the inland water coming in, and then you see also the small harbors that they created. There are several harbors going and entering into the city, and there was already a waterway around the city. And gradually, of course, it changed into the fortifications system. But the most important thing is actually the meaning of the place. Spuikom, where the water is collected and goes outside. And if you think about that, in these coastal towns, we had many floods. So coastal defense is at stake. And the boulevard in Vlissingen, it's one of the few boulevards in the Netherlands where really there's a seafront boulevard. You can have the waves 10 meters jumping up because it's just crashing, and it's spectacular. But it's no fun if you look at the left at the image when there is a flood entering the city, which has happened many times. You see how the boulevard is actually confronted with the sea. The area is what sometimes places are in cities, the leftover place. So Spuikom, they didn't know what to do with it. In the 1970s, they just were closing the water and just only having a small pond over there. They thought it also can be a dumping place of functions, so a large cinema, a large parking lot, another parking lot. And you see it in many other cities. Sometimes there's space and we don't know what to do with it. I mean, just do something. That was happening actually over there. They wanted to have a building program, and instead of just putting some building blocks in the middle, we said, we're going to make water again. So Spuikom will be a little smaller than it was in history, water. And we'll try to create a gradient from water to dune. And on the parking lots, we situate all the housing blocks and all the programs. It's underground parking lots. That's a bit hard because the economy is actually saying that you should not do this, and it's risky, and everything related to sensitive economic planning would say, don't do it. But if you think about what could be the quality of the space and the economy of the future, then definitely we should create these underground parking garages and place those buildings over there, because it creates also space. Now we have out of these 7 hectares with 5 hectares of landscape. So we can recreate this landscape. And there will be people who can enjoy it because those people will be living in those houses. And if you think about how this can actually work into seed events, then you can imagine that a parking garage that's over there, that it can contribute to the sea defense, because the boulevard has its own defense. If listening, they have a model that if sea level rise will come in the next decades, they can actually give up the ground floor. And the first floor will be the ground floor. If you look at our system, we are already a little bit higher. So we talked to the water board, and they were really happy with that because they were not asking for sea defense, but they said, okay, this is a new model, it's broadened sea defense. Okay, good. So we even integrate another function. And that's also nice if you can make a different solutions for various potential problems in the future. But not just because you want to solve it, but because you have a vision how you can actually create this integrated design. And at Spuikon can do more. Actually, the TU Delft model is actually saying that even on a very extreme storm, there's a one decline in the dike, a little bit further away, about 200 meters away. And there you could release some water from, let's say, when storm is hitting the boulevard, and even store it in Spuikon. Of course, you don't want to do this in a normal situation because it's clean water, so your whole ecosystem will be gone for several, well, maybe several decades. We know this in Zeeland. We have had always these problems that sometimes the land is saline and later on it becomes fertile land again. So water and nature in the heart of the area. We created also a pier, but not a pier towards the sea, a pier to the inland, that people could enjoy this. Well, this is politically a bit a hard issue because they say we're a poor city. It's one city that doesn't have a lot of money. In the Netherlands, still on the state governmental review, but it's a nice icon. And we want to have also the possibility that people can enjoy the nature. If you think even further, if you think in a bit more detail, we can create urban biotopes. And of course, in Spuikon, we also were already thinking about that planting system. And if I would explain that, I would say that if we create this landscape and this nature, we should create the urban biotopes, of course not as a natural biotope, it's a natural biotope that is linked to the ecosystem that is on the land that's really nature, but the urban biotope should have this very same type of system, which consists of several layers of planting. Big trees, small trees, shrubs, understory, and a good life for soil. And based on that idea, we think that it's also think about planting over time. So it's not just planting today all the same trees and the same heights, but have a kind of diversity. And this idea comes from our project in Utrecht. At that moment when we started, 80% of the ash trees need to be cut because they have a monoculture and it's ash tree disease. And before we had diseases on other trees, and then also those monocultures, they were really at stake. So going back to the system where you are inspired by nature, you can create a more robust system. And we think that it's not exactly the same. You can be inspired by the mother tree, the tree that is actually giving all the information to other species. And we can translate that in the urban situation to, let's say, the existing trees and the tall trees. And you compose the species linked to those trees. And you compose the species also linked to the soil that's there, although the soil is often already changed over time. We also can work with this system, thinking about creating density in some areas, like the tiny forests. The concept came from India to the Netherlands, invented by a Japanese professor. And on a tennis court, you can create already a very, very high biodiversity. So the performance is high on a small area, but then it means that no people can enter. So sometimes by creating more density, and sometimes less density, you can say, maybe the one space is a little bit more for people, the other space is a little bit more for animals. And we also can be inspired by the food forest. Now, some people in the rural landscape, they are creating food forests, actually sometimes for people, but also to create biodiversity. It creates, in fact, the conditions for birds and butterflies and insects to have some food. Thinking about those biotopes, we realize that it is sometimes on the wet ground, sometimes on the dry ground, sometimes more natural, sometimes more cultural. So, for instance, with Vlissingen, we can link it to the dune landscape. And the dune landscape has its natural dunes, of course. But if you go a little bit more to the urban area, then you add on species that are maybe linked to the urban conditions. The soil is already not really the pure soil, or sometimes a little bit of salt from on the roads, or there is some air pollution. If you create the habitat on the rooftop, of course, the natural conditions are also changed, and then it will be really cultural. It looks like that, but it's not. And if you think about dry and wet, for instance, in Stockholm, in the previous example, if you go closer to the water, you have the species and the conditions that are more linked to the water-loving plants. And on the top of the dune, the plants that are dry. And here we are experimenting. It's a competition. We lost one, but the experiment still also gives us the opportunity to think about it a little bit further. It's competition in Hamburg. And in fact, it's about where do we create what conditions and how can we link the potential for people and the potential for other species. Because it's not just only for nature. So urban biotopes looks like, okay, we're going to rewild the city and bring all nature all in. In our view, it's about the combination of people and species. And it's about different types of species that can flourish under different conditions. Here you see some examples of, let's say, these green gradients and how that might work with several species. And we try to develop, of course, a design tool for ourselves. How we could do this in the various species, in these various conditions, or in various locations. Working in the city center, we worked on Merwe, the canal zone in Utrecht. We did this together also, again, with a lot of offices, Ura, Geros, Stadkoraat, Houten, Koffie. We were intrigued by how could we enhance the landscape system within this new urban development and high density development. And we worked also on several other areas, another zone which is less dense, SUV. And if you look at the city of Utrecht, this city is a strange city because here the car dominance is actually already decreasing. The city is already working on this healthy city principles. And soon there will be more cycles than cars. That's in about 2 or 3 years. It's also crazy. But it's a good development. It means that actually we are already working towards slow mobility. On the other hand, it also requires that you create, instead of just some cycle routes, you need to create a network for cyclists. So thinking about urban development first is about thinking about what could be the conditions for change, and that will be on a larger scale. So the urban development is just in the, well, I can't point it out, but just one of the blocks, 22 hectares, and the other one 7 hectares. But on the whole larger scale, you can create a network. And you should create a loop around the canals to have this slow traffic network. If you think about water, you also think about it as a network. So how to create a more dense network. In this case, we can't do that much, but we can actually, with our new development, create and add a new canal, which links the bigger canal to the water system inland of this, well, it looks like a peninsula, it's not, it's just in between canals. And for the green, it's about the same. If you are densifying this whole area, you should create a large green area in the middle. We cannot show this just to people in the city, because there are people's houses, of course. It's a long-term vision. But if you want to create a real good place, or let's say more than 10,000 homes, you need also to create parks and green space. And if you think about the loop, it's not only about the loop of 11 kilometers, but it also is important that people in their daily life also can have a walk. So there can be loops for about 2 or 3 kilometers. There can be walkways just for elderly people. Maybe they need to place more benches because they want a seat. And this green network is supported by a chain of parks along the way. Here you see the current park, the largest development, Merwede, and at the north you see the other development, Merwede 4. In our view, it's about changing the rules for development of the city. If we want to create it green, as it is in the bottom left image, we would like to connect it to the water system. So capturing the water on the roofs, bringing it in small doses to the public realm, collect it over there, infiltrate it as much as possible, then bring it to the canal, and via that canal, bring it to the park. And once there's still an overdose of water, you can bring it to the other canal. But preferably, we want to use it all. That means that the top image is really important. If we want to change the conditions for this area, we need to change mobility. So there will be no cars in this area. The cars will be only on the top, on the road on the top. Along the canal, you will have pedestrians and cyclists. And in the small area, we will have pedestrians and cyclists, only deliveries. And deliveries at specific times and specific conditions. The infrastructure, here you see, that's linked to public transport, hubs, mobility as a service, new types of mobility, and delivery also linked to specific types of delivery that are allowed at specific times to collect garbage or to collect, or to bring materials. The underground system, we also need to think about that, because in the normal situation, a city is not planting trees because they say, oh, but we already placed a lot of ducting. There's no room for trees. But the underground infrastructure is in fact not supporting what we want to achieve above ground. So we said, at that moment, there will be a very simple system. Some places for underground infrastructure close to our buildings, some in the middle, and for the rest, we want to plant trees. And then you can get finally to a place where you can say, we maximize the number of green, the area of green. Maximizing, still you will have some pavement, and you will have some places a valley to collect the water, combined with the green. And we have to think about all the goals that we want to achieve. Also here, there's a problem that we want to achieve more than actually we can handle in the specific space. So we need to make clever combinations to think about where do we collect collect energy, or where do we create roof for nature? We had a strong debate with the ecologists and the Department of Recreation, resulting in this map. And in fact, it is a set of rules how to determine where we prioritize nature and where we prioritize children's play. And children's play was, in this case, the most dominant factor on the recreation. We started thinking about the big five, and the developers were really happy, the big five. And I was thinking about elephants, rhinos, etc. But the big five in this type of areas don't imagine that it's really something special as in Marie's lecture. These are really small animals, singing birds, some insects, some bats we have, and we have the hedgehog. But still, in this urban condition, you can start thinking from the species and start to have some design tools and think about what conditions you can create. And within the maximized green in public realm, we still have places for playground and some other places that are a little bit more hidden and give some shelter for the animals. And as you can see, the various planting types will still refer to the idea of the urban biotope, that we want to create variety in the species. And in this case, we called it Merwede biotope, because the area is called Merwede, and this is a very urban situation. You cannot refer to forest, you cannot refer to dune. There is already 1.5 meters sand under this whole development, so it is a kind of disaster area. Ecologic terms, but you can increase the quality of soil. You can create a nice planting related to the existing trees. And then I started, maybe you didn't notice that I started with the diagram that looks more or less like this one. And as a conclusion, if you think about landscape-based urbanism, Stefan's lecture started with that this is an image for a city in Ghana. They asked to design a new city, and we did this together, fabric, and it was mixed urbanism. And our first sketch was about the river system and the valleys. The valleys were just small bioswales. You even can't hardly see them, but only on the map you see them, and only when it floods. You think Ghana, Africa, it might not flood, it floods over there. The soil is actually almost impermeable. And the floods are creating real damage over there. The gas stations are exploding because the wires are not good enough. So we said we start as a natural system, and human habitat wanted to have a grid, and only on top of that, the grid was superposed. And the man from Human Habitat needs to think about it, and he said, okay, I love it. Because he could recall it as another city for 1 million inhabitants, but those are, let's say, several cities for 60,000 inhabitants. And he accepted the really crazy pattern of landscape, because this is not nice for urbanists. If you are a traditional urbanist, you want to have a grid without all these kind of crazy structures in there. But the nice thing, if we start with landscape and start moving development, you can create space for the landscape and create these large structures up front. Of course, it will be hard to realize it in Africa, because this is not the way they're used to. But at that moment, they were really happy to receive the plan and present it also for the UN Habitat Conference. We need to see how these ideas develop over time and how people can work with it. But first, I think we need to present the dream that we can reconquer landscapes and reconquer cities via the landscape plans that we make today.
Thank you very much, Martin, for this inspiring project. Really show how landscape can taken as the basis for any plants, and even in high-dense environments. Yes, of course. The question is, do you have questions? Maybe this is a start.
Thank you very much, Martin. I really love the way you have included very fine-grained ecosystems, miniature ecosystems from the courtyard to the street scale to the promenade to the whole city. Really appreciate that scaling. I wonder if you can tell me very simply, is the competition chosen yet for Cape Town, or is it just frozen?
It's still frozen.
So no decision, or
no decision, and it's really frozen because the mayor here to be correct.
Right.
And have favored one of the other design teams, and it's a serious problem.
Well, I would just offer that having lost many competitions, lots of failures, we benefit in seeing your work, and I really appreciate how you brought us back to the foreshore in a different context. Thank you.
Martin, thank you so much for this inspiring presentation. And what I observed, you have tons of data to work with, site analysis, and with tons of information. So I'm wondering about the digital tools you use to work with data. And do you consider AI as something that you would like to nurture in your work? And is the AI and digitalization is a part of what you're doing? Because it's a nice way to work with data, right? Especially with massive data.
Well, I'm really old-fashioned. They laugh about me in the office because I had my sketch paper and my flat admin, and I started just drawing very roughly and telling a story about what it should be. But of course, the other people in the office, they are working with all kinds of digital programs. And I think data-driven information might help us to understand the situation and, for instance, where it will flood, how often it will flood, what type of species might work. I still would, I'm also favoring poetry in the design. I didn't tell about that because you can't keep talking for hours, but I think the design is also about poetry and passion. And if we would allow AI to do that, there will be many good solutions suddenly pop up. But it feels for me almost like a plan that is made in China. We make it on a large scale, we envision, and then suddenly something else comes out later, and you think, but that was not exactly what we meant. So maybe AI will be more intelligent, but I hope that our human skills will allow us to create an artistic product related to science.
About adding the collection of data, that's a very good question. Not a good question, it's a big problem. Maybe also a good question. It's very interesting to have the data, but the project is called poetry, but in another way, it's an hypothesis. Project is in of Dutch, in German, Absicht means what I have in view, what I want to do. For this, you have to have the courage of an hypothesis. And then you need data to check your hypothesis. But the accumulation of data will never give you the idea of the project, from my point of view. It's Borges said you make a map which is more and more precise, and you You redraw the world, but so what? So intelligence artificial, I think, is very useful for many, many things. I'm not sure, well, what I want to say very simply is you must not exchange the priority. First, the idea of the project, what I have in view, and then you can use all the tools, the experiences, memory, literature, poetry, sometimes science. Why not? But first, hypothesis.
Hi, thank you for your lecture. I have a more specific question on your slide about biotopes, and there was this image saying like we need 50% native species and 50% exotic ones. I was wondering where this division comes from, or even if it needs to be 50-50, or yeah, like where the voice comes from also.
Thank you for this. It's a hypothesis. Again, in the Netherlands, we have sometimes a debate that it should be all native species. But in the city, we don't have all native species present. So in this condition, we said, at least we want to have half native species. But still, we can debate about what native species are, because some of the trees are here not native, but are here already for, let's say, more than 1,000 years. And maybe they are already are inhabitants, you could say. For a tree, that's such a long time. You can regard. If you would say pure native, I think we only have 3 species left here in our country. So, but it's an opening because this idea of urban biotopes is not most easily accepted by the maintenance department in cities. They say, well, we know trees and lawns, and that's easy to maintain. And we started at one point in Rotterdam with extra, more decorative planting, third layer, so it was not the 7 layers yet, to say something in between the trees and the ground cover. And at that time, they decided to change that maintenance into an organization that 2 gardeners would work on that project, and not just were in the pool for the entire city. And there was a jury coming because Rotterdam was nominated, and then they came to that project, and the workers were all there, and one of the jury members said, "It's a lot of more work, I think." And the people in government, they would say yes. But this man said, "No, it's not." Of course, but he loved to do the project because it was his project together with his companion over there, and they kept the green well. So it is maybe a little bit of work, but I think the result is amazing. And if we talk to the maintenance department, we need to convince them that it's acceptable to do a little bit more work, and that we still can work with, let's say, some parameters that they determine, because they are fascinated today with native species. Yeah, 50-50. It's not, you see, I think it's true because it's written there, but it's not.
It's really interesting, and also it's linked with what you said about urban forestry or wood forest, food forest. Because now we have this absolute exigence of indigenous species, but agriculture is completely exotic. Don't want to. Yeah, no. Yeah. As you said, if you take, you will have 3 species, really. And then if you go to permaculture or this new way of, because what we have to face now, and I will talk, it's the agricultural system with the ingredients and the poison, and then we can shift on permaculture, food forest, and then the introduction of we are not going to say no, we don't want any more corn. Everything comes from Bolivia to Iraq. So we are not going to go back to something which never existed. So I think your project is the same level of which is vegetable to big trees, is including the fact that you can't have this strict separation. This is a really bad science. It's nothing to do with ecology. It's a kind of stupid, which is avoiding or impeaching us to make projects. So we have to count on the stupidity of the bureaucrats. Don't forget the stupid. Not always.
No, it's true what you say. I think that at one point you need to start a narrative, and a narrative starts abstract. Sometimes they also ask, have you already built it? Now, at this moment, luckily, we built one wadi in a small town in Nederland, and it works amazing. But otherwise, people are also afraid that they have not seen it.
Another example of this species is the children playground. The elements inside the room, but the children must play without being hurt. No dirt, so no earth. So they put exotic rubber sheet, which is full of petrol, stinking, dangerous for the children. But they are clean. Who said that the children must be clean when they play? And with that, if you are practicing children, I've seen your design. Also, I use the same Mikado, trunk, and so on to try to escape from the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
It's like so. Aldovan I made interesting thing, thinking about no bullshit.
Yeah.
So we need poets.
Martin, maybe I have a last question for you. This thinking in terms of biotopes, how did it change your way of working as a landscape architect?
I think gradually over time, we started to collect some ideas. So first it started with the water toolbox. We're Dutch, so water toolbox, how to design the water. And then later on we tried to work with our green tools. And we elaborate a little bit more on them. And I think it works in a way that we respect more the aspect of time. I didn't tell too much about that, but the aspect of time in our designs becomes more important because the plants will grow, the trees will grow, sometimes the big trees need to be cut, sometimes the density maybe will be a little bit too, of the crowns will be a little bit too high, or sometimes maybe people won't accept. So, especially on the small scale, what type of change could be possible, thinking about that. And on the larger scale, just to allow, like if you would have here, many of the places will be either riparian zones, nature, or it will be urban farming zones. I think on the larger scale, we can let it go with time and give time, or make that robust structures that time can be in favor of, let's say, the natural development.
Yeah, because also the word relationships and connecting is often heard throughout the lectures today, by the way. But did it also help you to think in a more integral way? Or?
Yes, I think already the idea of how to make healthy things, then everything is connected. So connected in a spatial way, but also in a holistic way that we need to think about what is actually really at stake. So first we need to have also the debate, not just with one person, but the team, about what are we doing, why are we doing this, and how do we connect?
Can I say one word? Because as I have the follow next lecture or session, I would say your plan here is an extreme welcome transition to, because it's about the process, and this is not a form, this is a grid. And contrary as what we think, it's more free and acceptable of any process, and we are also looking for that. Creating the condition of natural processes to go on, or urban processes. This grid, urban grid, history showed us the incredible variation up, down, not making green or purple, which is much better than two many cities. The shapes come too soon and block the evolution. I like that. Nearly my river.
I'm looking forward to your lecture, where you process.
So well, yeah, I think this is a nice bridge, but please give Martin a hand.
I think we should back to